Starbucks just released its quarter results, but analysts were not impressed. Let's try to understand why. In the meanwhile, welcome to Investing Now, a channel where you can find fundamental analysis on companies. I would like to invite you to subscribe to the channel. You will be updated as soon as I upload a new video. As usual, I like to start with an overview of the company, followed by key figures on income statement, balance sheet, cash flow, the estimation of the intrinsic value, and finally the key points on the company. So, let's start with the overview. Okay, let's start. Starbucks is a global coffee company and coffee house headquartered in Seattle. Some key aspects of its business include coffee expertise, global presence, unique store experience, diverse product offerings, social responsibility, mobile and digital innovation, and Starbucks Reserve Roasteries. And in recent years, Starbucks has also developed mobile ordering and payments and loyalty programs in order to satisfy the changing consumer preferences and lifestyles. And in terms of revenue streams, 61% goes to beverages, 18% to food, 8% to packaged coffee and teas, 21% to other, that includes ready-to-drink beverages and other products. In terms of stock price evolution over the last 5 years, Starbucks went up by 95%, which makes more or less 20% a year. Which is ahead of McDonald's, 86%, Restaurant Brands International, the owners of Burger King, 14%, and ahead of the S&P 500. Some highlights here from the last quarter results. I would say that net revenue went up by 12% to a record value of 9.2 billion. This was a little bit worse than the initial projections, and so some analysts were not happy with these results. Anyway, same-store sales went up by 10% globally, 7% in North America, 24% internationally. The loyalty program went up by 15% year to year. Let's try to make some sense about the valuation of Starbucks, starting with the market capitalization. Starbucks has a market cap of 117 billion US dollars. It's a large cap company. The number of employees is 402,000, very large number of employees. The value of the beta is 0.93, meaning that the volatility of the stock is lower than the market. Ratio price to sales is 3.7, lower than the average of the industry. Price earnings ratio 31, price earnings growth ratio 4.35 for an average growth of 7.2%. Looking at the income statement, highlights here on the revenue evolution since 2017. It went up on average by 7.2%. Last quarter, as mentioned, revenue went up by 12.6%, net income by 25%. In terms of margins, 10.2 is the average net margin for Starbucks. The revenue per employee and net income per employee are both lower than the average of the industry and lower than the average of portfolio. Of course, the number of employees of Starbucks is very, very high. And that's it. Looking now to the balance sheet, highlights here on total liabilities being higher than total assets, which makes the book value negative. Total debt went up in 2020, but we can observe some effort to decrease debt over the last years. I would highlight also the capital intensity is 0.9, better than the average of the industry, emphasizing that Starbucks has better efficiency in capital usage. Also, the level of debt when compared to net income is also lower than the average of the industry. Looking at the cash flows, we can observe that in recent years the values have increased when compared to 2019 and 2020. Also, the free cash flow to equity is lower in recent years due to reduction of debt. In terms of margins, both cash flow margin and net operating cash flow margin are in line with the average of the industry, but the free cash flow to total liabilities is higher than the average of the industry. In terms of cash flow coverage, the value is in line with the industry. Looking at the capital expenditure figures, the value of the last year is in line with the value of 2018, but it has increased since 2020. Highlights here on the ratio between the return on capital employed and the average cost of capital, which is 2.2 on average, ahead of the industry, emphasizing that Starbucks has better efficiency in their investment decisions than the companies within the same industry. In terms of dividend policy, the dividends have been increasing since 2018 with a payout ratio of 60%, and currently the dividend yield is 2.0. In terms of valuation ratios, the values are more or less in line with the average of industry and the portfolio, a little bit ahead of the average of the portfolio. In terms of profitability, values are higher than the average of the industry, exception here for the return on invested capital. In terms of liquidity, I would say that the company is in line with the average of industry, and the same situation here to debt to net operating cash flow. If we compare Starbucks with McDonald's, I would say that the situation is more or less the same for both companies, exception here on liquidity, that McDonald's has better liquidity than Starbucks. Let's estimate now the intrinsic value of Starbucks, and for this purpose I've selected the scenario low growth. I've estimated a cost of equity of 9.3%, CAPM estimates 9.5%, and the weighted average cost of capital 7.5%. I am being conservative here in the final ratios. The current PE ratio is 31, and I estimate a final ratio of 14.4 over a period of 10 years. These are the forecasts for revenue, EBITDA, net income, free cash flow to equity, and earnings per share over a period of 10 years. And I'm also being conservative here with the average growth of forecast, which is estimated to be 4.9. Here we can observe the randomized values for the free cash flow to equity, free cash flow, net income, and earnings per share that are going to be generated with the Monte Carlo methodology. And these are the results for the intrinsic value of Starbucks, and I would say that the company is fairly priced. The current price is $102 US, and the methodology estimates values between 95 and 120. Of course, if we would invest today in Starbucks, the annual return would be lower than the required cost of equity, but this is a premium company, and so we must wait for really good opportunities to buy this stock at a really good price. And here are my considerations about the ratio evolution and the price estimation. And in the short term, I estimate that the price could reach 120. In terms of price evolution over the last 5 years, the current price is slightly higher than the weighted average of the last 3 years, and also the weighted average of the last year. And generally the Starbucks is ahead of this value, exception here for this period in 2022. Finally, the key points on Starbucks. In terms of guidance, the same-store sales are expected to grow between 7 to 9%. The global store growth is expected to be around 7%, and the global revenue between 10 to 12%. These are values for 2023. In terms of valuation, I consider to be fairly priced, and the valuation ratios are in line with the industry average. I would highlight also that liquidity of Starbucks is not very good, and Starbucks has a large number of employees. Now the SWOT analysis for Starbucks. I'm just going to highlight some ideas, and in terms of strengths, I would emphasize the strong brand recognition and reputation of Starbucks, and also the strong customer loyalty program. In terms of weaknesses, Well, Starbucks has high prices and also faces tough competition from other coffee chains such as Dunkin' Donuts and McDonald's and other coffee chains around the world. In terms of opportunities, I would emphasize the growth in coffee markets, particularly in emerging markets, and also Starbucks can take advantage of the brand recognition to launch new products such as ready-to-drink coffee and cold brew coffee and others, which is a good opportunity for Starbucks. And finally, in terms of threats, I would say that new entrants to the coffee market could challenge the revenues of Starbucks and also increase competition from other beverage companies such as Coca-Cola and Pepsi-Cola. And I would remember that Coca-Cola doesn't like to be second, and of course Pepsi neither. Finally, some mental models to help us better understand the future of Starbucks. In terms of moat analysis, I would say that Starbucks is ahead of competition, especially because of the strong brand recognition. Competitors are also good and above the average. Of course, competitors such as Coca-Cola and Pepsi-Cola are just competing with a small portion of the revenue of Starbucks, but nevertheless, these are good competitors. In terms of compound capacity, the value or my classification is here and above the average of the market. Over the last 5 years also, Starbucks has grown above the S&P 500. So I would say that it has a good compound capacity. And answering to the question if the company is relevant in 10 years, I think so, yes. Of course, again, the strong brand recognition, the expertise in this business, I think Starbucks will be relevant in 10 years. The risk is lower than the average of the market. And in terms of investment portfolio, yes, I do have shares of Starbucks, but just a small portion of my investment portfolio. Thank you very much. This was my analysis of Starbucks. I invite you to subscribe to the channel. It will be updated as soon as I upload a new video. If you have any questions or comments, please leave it in the section below. And in the meanwhile, I'll be preparing my next analysis. Thank you very much.